Thank you, Xenia. I'd like to thank everyone for being here. This is the first Housing Element Update Community Workshop. Just a quick reminder, this is not a formal public hearing. No action will be taken tonight. This is simply our first opportunity to introduce what a housing element is to the public, what the update, why we're doing the update, what the process is, what the schedule will be, and what will transpire going down the road. And with that, I would like to pass it over to Xenia. She's going to share a couple slides on how the public can participate.
Thank you, Aaron. Let me go ahead and share my screen here. Can you see the PowerPoint? Okay, so for members of the public wishing to participate by phone, you may do so by dialing 669-900-6833. At the prompt, you may enter the meeting ID 865-5780-3624. You can press pound, and during public participation, press *9 to speak. Additionally, tonight's meeting will have live Spanish interpretation.
Xenia, real quick, sorry to interrupt. The screen we're seeing, it has the slides, and it also has a live captions and subtitles box going over it.
Oh.
I think maybe you're...
What about...
There we go.
Okay, I'll call it... Oh. 1 second, I don't know why it's doing that. Okay. Well, tonight's meeting will have live Spanish interpretation. To access the interpretation, you will need to use the Zoom application from either your cell phone, tablet, or computer. Once you join the meeting from the Zoom application, you will see a small globe at the bottom or top of the screen. Click on the globe and you will be able to access the live interpretation. Marcy and Claudia are the interpreters for this evening. And that will be it for me, Aaron.
Thank you, Xenia. I would just also like to remind folks, while this isn't a formal public hearing and there's no time limit on how long you can speak when we get to the public comment and discussion period, just please try and be respectful of other folks' time and allowing everyone the chance to speak. And also remember that as we are doing Spanish translation, and I should remind myself that now, to speak a little slowly so they can catch up. Just don't talk too fast. So with that, I would like to turn it over to our housing element consulting team of Mintier Harnish and Rincon, and I will let them take it away.
All right, thank you. Let me share my screen. I've got a presentation here. All right, so welcome to the first community workshop for the 2023-2031 Housing Element Update. Thank you for being here. We really appreciate your participation, and we hope that you'll continue to participate throughout the process. With you tonight, we have Jim Harnish, the project manager with Mintier Harnish, and then myself, Ryan Lester. I'm an associate planner with Mintier Harnish, and then Brenna Weatherby, who's leading up the efforts for on the project for Rincon Consultants. So the outline of the presentation tonight, we're going to go through some housing element basics. We're going to discuss the regional housing needs allocation, the RHNA. We're going to discuss meeting housing needs, the project schedule, and community engagement. The city's project manager is Aaron. We've got his contact info here. I'll give you a second to write down his email address. You can contact him at any time. Aaron's a senior planner with the city. Okay. And now we're going to jump into housing element basics. What is a housing element? So a housing element is one of the 12 elements in the city's general plan. The housing element updates are required by state law and 8-year cycles. We are currently in the 6th cycle. And updates are done on a schedule that's prescribed by the state. So housing elements, what do? Housing elements provide an assessment of both current and future housing needs. They identify opportunities and constraints on housing production. They establish goals, policies, and programs to meet housing needs. And they update city practices and regulations to reflect new state laws. And that is a big point in this sixth cycle. We'll discuss new relevant state laws in a minute. There's quite a few. So the housing element identifies strategies and programs that focus on conserving and improving existing affordable housing, maximizing housing opportunities throughout the community, assisting in the provision of affordable housing, removing governmental and other constraints to housing investment, and promoting fair and equal housing opportunities, again, throughout the community. A big portion of the housing element is the housing sites inventory. The sites inventory is the part of the housing element that identifies the sites proposed to meet the city's housing needs. The sites inventory can include planned and proposed projects currently in the pipeline, vacant land, underutilized sites, accessory dwelling units, and it must address housing for all income levels and housing to meet the special housing needs of the community. And then lastly, the housing element reviews the existing goals, policies, and programs within the previous housing element. So the sixth cycle, as I said before, involves a number of new updates for consistency with state legislation. Excuse me. Some of the big ones are highlighted here. Streamlining the affordable housing approval process in SB 35, additional housing sites analysis requirements in SB 879, or AB 879 and 1397. And then affirmatively furthering fair housing, AFFH, that's a big new section in the sixth cycle. No net loss zoning, SB 166, and safety element update to address adaptation and resiliency is now triggered with the housing element update. So that has to happen as well. And then some other key ones are a number of pieces of legislation regarding accessory dwelling units. There's a number of updates the city will need to do, as well as standardization of the sites inventory analysis and reporting. HCD requires a specific form and they want it certain ways now. And then evacuation routes with SB 99 and AB 747 are also going to be critical new updates in this round. So the regional housing needs allocation, what is the RHNA? So the RHNA is the representation of the future housing needs for all income levels in the city for the next 8 years. So the planning period goes out to 2031. The RHNA is prepared by ABAG or regional COGS for other regions. And then the planning period covered here, again, for the sixth cycle is January 15th, 2023 to January 15th, 2031. We have a little graphic here that kind of explains how the RHNA comes about. The state reviews the previous housing element cycle. They issue a RHNA determination for the region that goes down to the local COG, in this case ABAG, who creates a methodology for distributing those units among the jurisdictions in their region. And then local governments use those RHNA numbers to update their housing element, which then in turn feeds the next cycle. So the RHNA for the city for this sixth cycle, lower income categories, we have very low income, 103 units, low 59 units, moderate income levels 26 units, and above moderate income levels 66, for a total RHNA determination of 254 units. And of those units, 64% of the RHNA is for sites that can accommodate lower income housing units. And what we'll see here, we have a comparison of the 5th cycle versus the 6th cycle. 5th cycle, the RHNA was much lower, a total RHNA of 39. In the 6th cycle, the state has really increased this. The total RHNA of 254 is an increase of 223 units when compared to the last cycle. And then also the distribution of those units changed. So in the 5th cycle, you had a high number of above moderate units here, and then everything else was lower. Whereas in the 6th cycle, you have a lot of very low income and low income units that you need to provide land for. Excuse me, thank you. And then as far as meeting housing needs, how do we begin to meet the RHNA? So there's a range of approaches, which could include reducing constraints to housing production, providing additional support to housing programs, updating city regulations to meet state requirements, identifying additional housing sites, rezoning sites for higher density residential uses, and increasing maximum permitted residential densities. So we need to identify capacity for 254 housing units in various affordability levels. We can determine existing development potential. These are pipeline projects that can be counted. We can identify development constraints, both physical and regulatory, that will constrain some parts of town. Determine the remaining development potential, and if necessary, identify additional sites, which may include rezoning for multifamily and higher density housing in order to meet the very low and low income level requirements. Here's the 5th cycle. This is about 24 of the 5th cycle sites here. And this is kind of the mapping exercise we go through. We'll be preparing new sites analysis and new mapping for this coming cycle. And we have, here are the first dozen sites as well. So you can see this is an exercise in first finding vacant sites, and then looking at other tools you can use to meet the RHNA. So the schedule for the process, phase 1 was project initiation. We've gone through that. Phase 2 is the housing element update, the meat of the document updating. Phase 3 will be a public health, safety, and noise element update. Phase 4 will include the public review draft housing element. Phase 5 will be HCD review, scheduled for summer of 2022. Phase 6 will go into environmental documentation. And then finally, phase 7 will be public review and adoption, which is scheduled for fall and early winter 2022, because as you see here, the HCD deadline for housing element submission is January 31st, 2023. So community engagement in the process is extremely important, obviously. We are going to be holding 3 City Council Planning Commission study sessions, a total of 7 focus group meetings, 4 community workshops, Planning Commission meetings and hearings, as well as City Council meetings and hearings. The workshops, workshop 1 is today, housing concerns and needs. Workshop 2 will be a workshop on the vacant and underutilized sites assessment. It will be an opportunity for the public to weigh in on draft sites. Workshop 3 will be affirmatively furthering fair housing and a safety element update workshop. And then the 4th workshop will be on the public review draft housing element. We're doing a number of efforts for an engagement, including we've created a branding and logo. We've released a newsletter, and we have a second one coming later in the project. We have a website, sthelenahousing.com. It has tons of information. Please go there. You can sign up for our email list. You can leave comments on the project right on the homepage. We've really tried to make it available and easy for you. Then social media outreach, working with local groups and stakeholders, virtual events like this, Zoom, online surveys and interactions, and then joint study sessions and hearings. Now our website has, like I said, quite a bit of information for you, including information on what is required in the housing element, what has changed in state law, what is the RHNA, some of the things we're talking about here today, but in more in depth so that you can really dive into those topics and really learn. Newsletter 1 was on the housing element overview. That's available on the website now. Got a picture of it here. A newsletter 2 will come out with the public review draft housing element. And again, this is available on the documents page. We've got a preview of here's our website here. And what you'll see is these 2 buttons. First of all, this orange button is to sign up for the email list. When you click it, it gives you one of these. Just give us your name and email, hit send. You'll be signed up for the email list. You'll get e-blasts and be kept up to date with everything happening with the project. And then there's a comments box here, this green one. Oops, I went too far. This comment box here, when you click on this, it opens up a box. Just put in your name and email, leave us your comment, hit send, it comes right to us. We would really appreciate any comments you can provide on our work here on the Housing Element Update. And then up here, you'll notice we have a translation option. So if you'd like to view the website in Spanish, you can just click up here and choose Spanish. We'll try and make that available. And it's available on all the pages throughout the website. And then we have some accessibility options. If you find you need them, you can click this little accessibility guy, pops up a little widget, and you can click on whatever you need to help you view and read and really dive into the website. So what are the next steps in the process? Data collection and assessment, review the status of existing goals, policies, and programs, and to begin to prepare the draft housing sites inventory. So with that, I'm going to turn things over to Brenna Weatherby with Rincon Consultants, and she's going to lead us in a discussion.
Thanks, Ryan. Thanks for having me here tonight, everyone. We would like to facilitate a discussion at this point in the workshop. We've got a couple of question prompts up here on the screen. We're of course willing to take all comments. We want all information and feedback that you have to provide. But we were hoping that these 2 could prompt the discussion, maybe get things going a little bit. So tonight, we'd like to find out from you, what do you think the city's major housing issues and concerns are? And then also, what should be the city's priorities when addressing housing issues and concerns? So those are just a couple prompts, but again, I'd like to open it up now for anyone who would like to provide comments, and we are hoping to engage in a good discussion.
I will have to exit out of screen share mode so I can see the participants.
Sure.
Any members of the public who wish to comment can raise your hand and I will unmute you and you'll be able to speak. Okay, I have Jenny Ocon. I will unmute you. Okay, you should be able to speak now, Ms. Jenny Ocon.
Great, thank you. My name is Jenny Ocon and I serve as the Executive Director of the Up Valley Family Centers. And We are a social service nonprofit located in town. We serve individuals and families who work here. And based on our experience serving the local community, there's a significant shortage of housing that is affordable to low and moderate income households. This particular longstanding challenge has been further compounded by the recent 2020 wildfires. When we work with families, we see there's a large imbalance in the amount of rent they pay versus the wages they earn. They're paying a large share of their income towards housing expenses, leaving little for other essential needs. Over this past year, we served over 200 St. Helena-based households with emergency financial assistance as a result of their inability to pay rent because of either COVID or wildfire-related economic hardship. When families are seeking our help finding housing, there are really no good options. Affordable apartments in the area have 5-year waiting lists or are not accepting more people onto their lists. And the ability to purchase a home on a moderate income is also out of reach here. So we urge the city to create more affordable options. We're pleased to see that there's a significant portion here that would be dedicated to very low and moderate homes, because we just know that working families are, the wages that they're earning aren't covering the cost of living here. We also would just urge the city to create multi-unit housing that is healthy for its residents and is smoke-free. Specifically, secondhand smoke from one unit can drift to other units through windows and doors and air ducts. And we know that up to 65% of the air in an apartment can come from other units in the building. And 2 in 5 children who live in multi-unit housing are exposed to secondhand smoke in rental housing in the United States. So we know breathing secondhand smoke causes serious health problems for children and adults. And we wanted to mention that issue as well. And thank you for the opportunity to share our thoughts.
Okay, thank you so much.
Appreciate your comments.
Any other members of the public can raise your hand to speak now.
Anybody? This is your time to give your input and let us know. Yes, there will be more opportunities, but this is the first one. We'd love to hear from you.
Okay, I have Ms. Nancy Durbin who raised her hand. Let me allow you to speak here. And you should be able to speak now.
Hi, good evening, everybody. Since Aaron just so vigorously encouraged us to speak up, I've been reviewing a lot of documents, historic city council meetings, newspaper articles, all kinds of stuff going back for over 20 years. And in just the last 10 or 11 years, there have been numerous proposals for affordable and workforce housing projects, and the city has rejected every single one of them. Since the last projects the first and last projects that were built over by the Upper Valley campus and the Hunt Grove apartments. So I'm hoping this process that you guys have laid out, I guess what I want to know is, how do you overcome what seems to be a lack of political will for larger scale, low income and workforce housing projects? There's been a lot of focus on trying to figure out a way to do really small infill stuff, but the housing demands have gotten so enormous, and I just don't see how it's possible to meet the needs without some large scale developments as well as the smaller infill. So I'm rooting for you. I hope that this process is going to net the housing that's needed. I mean, we could never get as much housing as we actually need because it just the land and buildings aren't there. But happy to see the process underway and looking forward to providing more housing for the people that really keep this community alive. It isn't the tourists. I mean, it's nice to get those tourist dollars, but it's the everyday, really hardworking people, many of whom have to commute to work here or have multiple families in one unit and so forth. So I'd like to see some big changes in that area. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy, for your comments.
Thank you, Ms. Jordan. Any other members of the public wishing to provide any input? Here we have Mr. Joe McGrath. You should be able to speak now.
Yeah, hi, this is Joe McGrath. I've done some development here in town, and then it's obviously been extraordinarily challenging, particularly in terms of building multifamily. I guess the thing that, there's a couple of points I just probably like to make. One is that it's always important that we keep in mind when we use the terms affordable, it does not necessarily mean that that's sort of a cost-effective building, meaning that you could build the building at a sort of a return rate that would allow you to rent it at the necessary market rates that the previous, the first commenter discussed, meaning wages are not adequate to meet a rental rate that you can cost effectively build to support in a market environment. So affordable today is not cost effective generally in most of California, and in San Leandro particularly is even worse. It's also important to understand that, you know, when a lot of times when we talk about affordable, we're talking about effectively nonprofits using subsidies to build housing to sort of augment the costs associated with that construction, and that inherently makes that a long and difficult process. And I think the affordable projects that have been built in San Helena are testimony to that. They take a long time. They're very challenging to get financed, to get all the ducks in a row across different agencies, to secure the grants or loans or incentives or what have you. It's just a very arduous process. And so it's a very slow process. And I think, you know, my attitude has always been that that you need to look at market partners to help solve the problem. And, you know, a lot of people, that makes their hair grow up on their arms, but that's to adequately meet the need, even close to 254 or what have you, we need to figure out how to engage market solutions to help solve the problem. And so that means that we need to figure out what in the code or the zoning ordinance, et cetera, needs to be looked at to make it more cost effective to build to support the market. And, you know, it's obvious to everyone that San Helena, again, in the Upper Valley in general and Napa Valley in general, that's more difficult by land costs, and then also by a lot of sort of NIMBY opposition. But when I say that, I mean, you know, there are things that the planning department and our own zoning ordinance can look at to be able to drive more cost effectiveness in suiting this market or in meeting the needs of this market, and things like density, parking requirements, height limits, et cetera, fees, regulations, obstacles like water neutrality. All of these things drive cost into sort of market-based solutions to meet, say, even a moderate, the moderate threshold for affordability. So that's what sort of one comment. The other comment is on the identified sites. It doesn't appear that a lot of those have kind of a feasibility or I guess I don't know what the right word is, doability element to them, meaning have we engaged the owners of those sites? Do we know what their long-term plans are? Is there any interest in those sites moving in that direction? Because I think, we meet the needs of the housing element and the needs of the state by identifying those sites and say, yeah, those could be zoned and those at this zoning can meet those requirements. But I've seen time and time again, when I was on the planning commission down in Orinda, that a lot of sites were thrown out that had no reasonable path to ever be developed. And so when we identify opportunity sites, it seems that we should be doing a lot more due diligence as to, whether that's even reasonably feasible. There's even a reasonably feasible path for them to actually be developed. And like I see Dr. Crane Vineyard as one of the sites, and I know it's zone high density or what have you, but it's not clear to me that Beckstoffer will ever sell that property. And so, we should be rating these sites as to sort of any sort of reasonable feasibility of a path towards development, which would include, some interest by the owner to part with that site to some other party that may be interested in developing it. Then it also, it seems to me that we keep pressing on the boundaries of the urban limit line to identify those opportunities because those are bigger sites. And it seems to me where we have extraordinarily high competitive land pressures on price that we should be trying to press for density and press for taller and more towards city center, which sort of lessens traffic load, brings more adjacency to public transit, reduces environmental stress, et cetera, versus sort of continuing to push on the boundaries where you have a competing high economic alternative use of the land. It's sort of ironic that we have a Main Street full of empty buildings and we're talking about pushing development out on the boundaries of the urban limit line. Empty buildings at the commercial retail level. So that's something that I would advocate sort of we take a step back and think about a little bit. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Very, very good comments. Appreciate that.
Joe, I will say, we'll take the comments and the information that you've provided and it will help us as we're looking at the sites inventory and trying to shape it this time around. I will say that with this 6th cycle housing element, the justification that jurisdictions need to provide in order to include sites on their inventory list is much more, it's a lot more than it used to be. So the requirements are much more stringent. The justification has to be there to show that either this is done in the past, been done in the past, or that we can reasonably assume that it will be done in the future for whatever reason, property owner interest or other trends. So I did just want to mention that justification is much more significant than it was in previous cycles.
Okay, we have Nancy Durbin, who would like to speak again.
Thank you. Could you please explain a little bit more about what that means when you say the justification? What is that kind of made up of? How do you go about that? Thank you.
Sure. So, I mean, HCD wants to see a variety of things. If you have property owner interest, that's like gold as far as the sites inventory is concerned. And, you know, stepping down from there, if you can show that sites have been developed, sites that are similarly figured have been developed in such a manner that is proposed in this housing element. That's also important. The HCD wants to see the trends. They want to see the patterns. They want to make sure that they really want to see things developed. I know that this is really a capacity analysis, but from where they stand, they want to see the development occur within the income level categories that they've set forth. So the justification, we also look at things like code enforcement. There's been code enforcement issues with a certain property that can help in providing that justification. Age of structures on the property can also help provide justification, as can we sometimes look at land to improvement value ratio to see if, you know, the structures and the improvements on the land are worth more or less than the value of the land itself. So it's a lot of things that we take into consideration, but when we fill out our sites inventory spreadsheet, we have to provide information on any improvements, when they were constructed, what state they're in right now, or alternatively, is the property vacant? So those are just some of the things. I don't know if that answers your question or not. There's a whole lot of information that kind of goes behind it, but I'm happy to talk more about it if there's something in particular else that you'd like to know.
Ms. Durbin, does that answer your question?
Am I still on there?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, great. That helped quite a lot. Thank you. I'm wondering, back to a comment Mr. McGrath made, pointing out that there's a lot of vacancies around downtown. How does something like one building that whenever I drive by to go to Steve's Hardware, the Terra building, which used to be that restaurant, and it's a big, beautiful building. It's been empty for quite some time. And I always have thought, gee, wouldn't it be neat if they could make some little studio apartments in there or something? But does repurposing a building, is that a big, huge deal, or is that fall under any of the categories of justification or stuff like that? Thanks.
Can, for sure. I mean, we're seeing a lot of communities right now that are impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. So in other jurisdictions that we've worked in, we have made that justification to HCD's satisfaction that, you know, we've seen a downturn in some of the commercial space occupancy rates, and that they don't foresee that picking up anytime over the next 8 years for whatever reason, or not to the extent that it was previously. So especially if there was something like property owner interest, but it is something that we take into consideration, how long a property has been vacant, and then what the city is seeing in terms of trends of that actually being reoccupied with a commercial space at some point in the future.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other members of the public who wish to speak? And we have Esther, I apologize if I am mispronouncing her last name, Ackersloot. Let me unmute you, and you should be able to speak now. And I believe your microphone shows us off on the screen.
Unmute, okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
I'm not familiar with how this operates, so it's my first time.
Okay, we can hear you.
Okay, well, I sent an email previous to this about recommending a place that might be used as a possible site. And of course, there's been much to do about it. I've attended SHAPE committee meetings where they talked about properties for the city. And as far as I can recollect, most of the properties are actually quite small regarding any particular housing operations. But of course that can be remedied, I suppose, depending on, maybe adjacent properties. However, I suggested that the Adams Street property could be used for low-income housing. There's been years of letters and reports and emails that have recommended this. And as far as I can understand, the residents are very much in favor of it. So that could be used as a site for low-income housing, part of it. Anyway, that is my suggestion. As I say, I'm not really familiar with any other privately owned properties, so I can't speak on that. But that is my suggestion for the low-income housing. Is that sufficient?
It is, thank you. And I'll just, I guess, say a little bit more. You mentioned lot consolidation in your comment that potentially, more than one property could be combined to create a larger parcel. That is something that HCD is okay with doing. And I wanted to mention too, they do have some restrictions now on sizes of parcels that can be used to satisfy the low income, so the very low and the low income RHNA requirements. So they're looking for properties that are no less than 1/2 acre in size, and then properties that are no more than 10 acres in size. So for a lot of communities that are looking at infill development, they have to use lot consolidation as a tactic to creating parcels that can meet that 1/2 acre minimum size. And that is something that can successfully be done if those properties are adjacent to one another, and especially if those trends have been seen in the city elsewhere. But the adjacency and the likelihood for those to be consolidated is something that we'll consider. But I appreciate your comments, and we will look at that parcel as we're preparing the sites inventory.
Thank you.
Oh, you're on mute, Jim.
I just wanted to mention to Esther that we have received your email, so thank you very much.
Any other members of the public wishing to speak can raise your hand now. Okay, we have Paul Doring. Let me allow you to speak. Okay, go ahead now, Paul. And I believe you might be on mute.
Thank you. I've been following the conversation. It's a very interesting one. Thank you for Nancy, Esther, and Joe McGrath for participating. These issues are extremely complicated for a small city like St. Helena. Couple of thoughts I have is I want to make sure that we don't underestimate the portion of the analysis with respect to public safety. Fire evacuation routes. We are in constant bombardment of potential fires, and it seems like we're focusing on housing, but we really need to make sure that we focus on public safety and not let that sort of be a sort of a secondary issue. What brings me to this meeting is the potential for public properties to be used for affordable housing. And I think I agree that, I agree with Mr. McGrath that, properties that have been evaluated and identified in the past are really not feasible properties. The most feasible properties to develop affordable housing in St. Helena are likely public properties, including Adams Street, including Railroad Avenue, including several other properties that the city itself actually owns. To me, that is probably the most direct, easiest way to accomplish getting affordable housing in St. Helena. So I just want to make sure that when we identify these sites, we do not just focus on private properties. But I agree, if there are market partners like Joe McGrath who are willing to put their capital into St. Helena, of course we should encourage that. And thank you for Mr. McGrath for doing that. But you know, we have a number of properties in the city of St. Helena that the city, the residents own, that we should be focusing on to accomplish this really a daunting task of 254 units, you know, compared to like 30 or whatever it was, 31 units in the past. So I'll just leave it there. Thank you for all the comments. Thank you for all the folks who are willing to take the time to engage on this important issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Okay, we have Nancy Durbin. You may speak now, Ms. Durbin.
Well, I just want to thank Mr. Doring for that input and give a great big fat amen on the idea of utilization of public properties. Thank you, Mr. Doring.
And we have Joe McGrath. Go ahead and speak now.
Yeah, it might be interesting just to provide a little bit of anecdotal input relative to sort of trying to identify property, because I'm actually trying to do that right now. I mean, my angle on this is, and my goal is, you know, to try to serve, you know, from a market perspective, the moderate part of this equation. It's almost virtually impossible to do much below that without getting into sort of a subsidized housing. But so I've been looking for lots. And so maybe it would be interesting to just talk about some of the barriers to turning those from sort of identification or identifying those to actually, you know, pursuing them and doing something about it. One of them is, say, 900 cranes for sale. It's not on the opportunity list. I think it's zoned medium. I think it's zoned commercial or sort of commercial industrial or something like that. It's not zoned medium or density or high density residential. And so that in of itself becomes sort of a big barrier. It's in an interesting location. But so what is the process for rezoning? Can we speed up or expedite process for rezoning? Can we make that more clear on the path for doing that? Those are things that would sort of entice someone to maybe step into that and try to push that. That lot is challenged because it has high voltage transmission lines that PG&E decided to plop on top of it. Not sure this venue can do much about that, but that's another challenge to what would otherwise be actually a very good lot. The lot came to, I think the Minnigan's lot came on sale. That's on the corner of Kidd Road and McCorkle. I personally would be insane to do something there, but somebody else might. But that lot, for example, is zoned medium density, also not on the potential list, even though I think the Minnigans have been talking about selling that for some time. Then you look at the MDR zoning, and it only, even though it's MDR zoning and would allow, you know, probably I think 16 units on there, they have to be triplexes by our zoning code. They couldn't be apartments. So triplexes are not nearly as cost effective to build as apartments. So those are just things. I'm just looking at like 2 lots that are actually for sale that have people looking at them for various uses that have obstacles to, you know, get them to the next stage. And those are just 2 lots. I could probably go on with several more, but those are the types of challenges that a developer would have, or even the nonprofits would have, in terms of evaluating potential opportunity sites. So we really got to figure out like how to clear the hurdles as much as possible if you want to try to accelerate this process. Thanks.
Thank you, Joe.
Any other member of the public wish to speak at the moment?
Does not look like it. Ryan, Jim, or Brenna, did any of you guys have any closing remarks that you wanted to make?
Just to thank everyone for joining us, for giving us their opinion. If you want to comment on specific sites, please feel free to use the comment box on our website. It comes to all of us working on the project. We see it immediately. That would be super helpful.
I would reiterate what Ryan said. I really appreciate folks taking their time to provide us some feedback on this. There's a lot more to go on this project. We'll keep in touch with you, follow up on, there's some great comments. I've been taking notes, and we're definitely going to follow up on these and others. So I appreciate your time.
Thank you both. Okay, I think that's going to do it. Again, yeah, to reiterate, both Ryan and Jim, I really appreciate everyone for showing up and taking the time. Felt like we had some really good comments tonight, and yeah, we will take those to heart as we move forward. Thank you all.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.